Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles codified by Dr. Malana Karenga. These aren't just a list of key Swahili words that we should familiarize ourselves with during the last week of the year in our Kwanzaa celebrations. No, these principles are deeply rooted in Alkebu-Lan tradition. Nguzo, pillar, or we might be more familiar calling it column, as in those columns we see in those Greco-Roman style temples in the past. But these columns don't have their origin in Greece or Rome. No, their origin is in Kemet, the original word being dejed. Dejed as in a column or a pillar or a structure in order to support the entrance to a temple. Dejed was tied back to one of our original deities, Osiris. He was considered the bringer of justice to the Kemetic people. He gave them their ability to civilize themselves. And so too do the Nguzo Saba. The 7 principles: Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujama, Nia, Kuumba, Imani. They roughly translate out to English as unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith.
Internal freedom must be obtained before external freedom can ever truly be exercised. Before we're able to effectively fight and secure our rights as free beings, we must first secure our internal freedom, something that we relinquished under duress along our tragic way. Internal freedom is our power to think outside of the context of our current oppressed state. Essentially, we have to first think as free people, and then that will lead us to behave as free people. The second principle in Nguzo Saba, Kujichagulia, addresses the need to realize internal freedom. It's described as self-determination, which is exercised by our ability to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Slave. What image pops into your head? For many, it's an image of someone who looks like us. A deeply melanated person bound by chains, or someone held captive on a plantation. That's the image that I see in my mind's eye. Dr. Ben-Jochannan, in his writings, Africa, Mother of Civilization, points to the fact that when someone says the word slave, our likeness is what's visualized. Reason being, most of us have accepted that imagery because that's the most prominent depiction of human bondage offered by those who serve as authority on history. Today we build a nation where we define ourselves and not permit those that seek to destroy us to inform us of who we are. Just because our ancestors were once enslaved does not mean that we must carry a slave identity today.
Learn who you were, learn who you are, learn what you must be. And I say, I walked with my head in the clouds because I have no fear. I have no embarrassment of enslavement because, you see, the shackles have been off my body, my leg, my feet, and I've removed it from the last place, my mind.
Enslavement was something that was done to us, what we experienced. Enslavement was not the start of our story, nor is it the end of our story. It mustn't forever define our existence. To define ourselves as one of the precepts of Kujichagulia dictates we must bridge the gap between who we were prior to enslavement and who we aspire to be post-enslavement. So I challenge you to take time to learn about the multitude of contributions that you made to the advancement of humanity prior to your Ma'afa, so that you may be reminded of what you looked like once upon a time when you were free. Go back to who you were before enslavement and reacquaint yourself with the self you once defined.
Don't accept what I say. Check it out. Read books about yourself. There are millions of them. Let no one tell you to the contrary. Read all kinds of religious dogmas and theories. Don't let anyone tell you this is it and there's no more. Read it all. Read mine. If you could read Mein Kampf, you could read anybody's Holy Bible, the Hindu Bhagavad, the Muslim Quran, the Christian Holy Bible, New Testament, the Jewish Old Testament, the book of Ulamare, the teachings of Ulamare, that's the Yoruba religion. The teachings of Dambala Widow, the teachings of Budum, and by the way, it has nothing to do with witchcraft. The teachings of Ngai, the major god in Kenya, Unkulunkulu of South Africa, Ra, Ptah, Osiris, the god of resurrection. 4,000 years before Jesus, he was taught to raise men from the dead. He's known as the God of resurrection. Read about your people in the past, the present, the future. Understand Du Bois as you understood Garvey. Understand Malcolm as you understood King. Understand these men. Understand Sojourner Truth as you understand Harriet Tubman. Go back into the past and read about your most beautiful and your most strong queen like Hatshepsut, who fought and drove out the Hyksos out of Egypt. And Zingha, who fought for 13 years ahead of her troops, defeating the Germans and the British and others before she died on the battlefield. Queen Kahina, who stopped the Arabs in North Africa and died at the head of her troops. These are great and glorious African women.
Name. The next step in exercising self-determination is nomenclature and appellation. According to dictionary.com, nomenclature, a noun, is a set or system of names or terms, as those used in a particular science or art by an individual or a community. Nomenclature is to assign names to things, and to assign a name to someone or something is an exercise of power. You might question, what does that have to do with building our nation? When foreigners invaded our homeland, putting aside for a brief moment the multitude of offenses that we suffered and concentrating on one in particular, the blatant disrespect we endured by the invading foreigners, their refusal to acknowledge and use the names that we assigned to our world. Why did the invaders insist on renaming things? Why not continue to use the words from the native languages? Why did Manamatapa have to become South Africa, Puanit, Somalia, or Mwanza Nyanza, Lake Victoria, Kemetsi, the Mediterranean? Reason? It was an integral aspect of an ongoing psychological assault. This is what Dr. Ben had to say.
Ancient Manikongo. I am dealing with the smallest people on record, the Twa and the Hutu, which Europeans call pygmy. Along with those people, those who migrated from the area, Grimaldi that went to the most southern tip today, which was called at one time Munomotapa, and that's the name I still call it in spite of who want to call it other names today. Because if it was good enough, the ancient Africans, in terms of this, the name of their country, Munomotapa, I still call it Munomotapa, in spite of the fact that the Portuguese said that the Munomotapa was a bad man. Therefore, some Africans feel that they must change the name to suit and to satisfy the modern ones. I still call it Munomotapa.
Just imagine naming the largest lake in Africa after a woman who was responsible for the murder of more Africans than Adolf Hitler killed Jews in his maniacal drive throughout Europe. Victoria was one of the original masters of genocide of the Christian era, end quote. Our perspective was willfully negated because it was a necessary step in destroying us as a people. So in our effort to build a nation, what was done must be addressed and corrected. We have to refute the propaganda of the Dark Continent, discovered and saved by Europeans as the lie that it is. We had a bright and remarkable history prior to the arrival of the invaders. As descendants of the offended, we must not perpetuate any of those lies that were told to justify our subjugation. Let's reclaim our original names by putting them into use. This is necessary because the names we chose to assign to things gives insight as to how we perceived that thing, what it meant to us as individuals or as a community. The name we use reflects how it affected our lives. This is an aspect of speaking for ourselves. When we defer to European terms instead of our own, we in turn mute ourselves in our own conversation. Man names himself for others to address him accordingly. Some more words from our transitioned elder, Joseph Ben-Jochannan.
They're going to tell you all these classifications and rule all of you with all the classifications. If we would say we are a people that develop our own integrity in the Western world, and you don't categorize us. You don't tell me I'm this, that, or others. I decide myself. When my little daughter was born here in Sydenham, there used to be a Sydenham hospital then.
Yes, I worked there.
The nurse put down on my child's birth certificate, race Negro. When they bring the birth certificate, I said, this don't belong to us. So the nurse said, yes, isn't that Colette Johannan? I said, it's a Colette, but I'm a child. They said, why? I said, I don't have a Negro child. They said, well, your wife is a Negro and you're a Negro. I said, no, you ain't looking right. My wife is an African and I'm an African. My wife is black and I am black. No, if you put any of those categories, it is my child. But she said, no, you are that. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you keep it because I don't want it. We went to the court. Judge Leibowitz was then the judge. And Leibowitz asked, what is on your marriage certificate? We got the Africans. He says, please, he's an African. He got on his marriage certificate African. The application say African. They can only have an African child. You see, it's what you allow people. You determine, and go to court if necessary. You determine what you are and have the guts to fight it. If you must have something worth dying for. Otherwise life means nothing. You must have something that you're not going to move on. And that you decide what people are going to call you. Don't let them call you what they want.
What did we call ourselves prior to interacting with other groups?
Africa was a colony, a little enclave, about the 4th century when the Greeks would come to Lesbos, now called Libya, to kind of put their ear to hear what was coming out of Egypt because they were barred from coming in mass. It was not until the Persians captured Egypt in 525 under Cambyses that the Greeks were allowed in any large number. That little colony that the Greeks call Africa later spread to now the entire continent. It started around the 4th dynasty. However, ancient people called the continent Corphy, C-O-R-P-H-Y-E, Ortegia, O-R-T-E-G-Y-A, Hesperia, H-E-S-P-E-R-I-A, Ammonis, A-M-M-O-N-I-S, Libya, the whole continent, L-I-B, well actually it was Lesbos, L-E-B-U-S, and Ethiopia, E-T-H-I-O-P-I-A. However, the oldest documents that I have found by the Ethiopians themselves and the Moors, there is a name they call A-L-K-E-B-U-L-A-N, Alkebu-Lan. And that's the oldest name that I know that the continent was ever called.
Referring to ourselves as Alkebu-Lan is to refer to ourselves as we see ourselves, the spirit people. Alkebu-Lan is the land we are from and therefore have inherited as our birthright, not necessarily to own it, but to occupy and safeguard it from abuse. Alkebu-Lan is the indigenous spirit people who are of that land. Alkebu-Lan is the philosophy we developed as a result of the deep relationship we, the people, have had with that land and the land with us, the spirit people. We see things differently. We mustn't relinquish or give up that right to see ourselves and the worlds we inherited through our own self-preserving lenses. We inherited Alkebu-Lan. The right to name everything within it belongs to us alone. Our words, our languages, have been nullified. We must return to speaking our own languages, to teach ourselves, teach our children, our perspective, our stories. We were once forced to speak European tongues. Now it's all we speak. Our languages are dying. It's so disturbing to have our only common languages be European languages. I hope we can reach a time when we can communicate with one another without displaying evidence of imperial influence. Appellation, the name or title by which someone is known. The story of our people is carried by the individuals. Each person a well-phrased line. The family a descriptive paragraph. The community a chapter of our intriguing saga. Whenever a person's name was called, for whatever reason, whoever heard the call was informed of which people the person being called was from, and the place or role that person being called assumed amongst their people upon their birth. That ritual cast a spell on all who heard by setting an expectation that the name-bearer live up to the hopes and the dreams of those who named him or her. We here on the western side of the world were stripped of our names. It was done by design. Captors sought to break our spell. Our name is our identity, which is our history and our culture. Your identity, who you are, is made up of the experiences of your past, as well as the things that you do in the present to secure your future. The deliberate prohibition of the use of our names was designed to cut us off from our identity, from who we are. Captors understood that with our names, we were living, breathing record of our people. I wonder if there's a study out there that compares the life path of the individuals that were informed that their name has meaning, whether it's named after someone revered or a family's aspiration for them, as opposed to those who carry names just because their parents thought it sounded nice. If someone knows of a study or comes across one, let me know. I'm curious about the depth of the findings because the name that you respond to speaks to your psychology. So to carry a European name that traces back to a slaver, what does that say about our psychology? This is my realization. For me, Evelyn Charles, to wear a European name is to say that where or how I acquired the name is where I began, that there were no others, or that I care to know no others that contributed to my existence prior to me assuming that name. Now, I say that the name is assumed. While in bondage, you were so-and-so who belonged to Johnson family, for example. Not having knowledge of ourselves after bondage and needing to fit into the European system, we took on the most recent surname or the surname with which we most strongly associated. We made an association with them. The European did not associate their name with our identity. They associated their name with our ownership. We wrongly allowed our proximity with Europeans to define us. We assumed ourselves to be Europeans by giving ourselves their names. Now, let's be clear. The European didn't give us their name or rights to claim their heritage. Just walk up to a Caucasian, Johnson or Williams, Jones or McCain, whatever surname you wear. Walk up to a European by that same surname and assert a connection. Please be sure to tell us how it goes. We want to hear of your stories. In the meantime, here's one story. One of the times ago when John McCain was running for president, he publicly claimed that his family didn't partake in the enslavement of Alkebu-Lan people. Just so happens that proclamation was heard and it reached none other than a descendant of someone John McCain's ancestors had once enslaved. John McCain was contacted and swiftly informed of his family's history. These are the words of the descendants.
And I've known of the ties to John McCain. and tried to get him to communicate with me about that, but he has been unwilling, at least to date.
Well, he actually found out in 2000, to be fair to the senator there, and he did come forward and gave this quote, how the Tiok descendants have served their community and, by extension to their country, is a testament to the power of family love, compassion, and the human spirit. And then he added in the statement, an example for all citizens.
This was gathered from the Wall Street Journal's 2008. It's a featured story written by Douglas A. Blackman. These people call themselves McCain. He referred to them by the name of the plantation, and because the plantation was so large, ended up being the default name for the town. John McCain's response is the epitome of whitewashing. He didn't acknowledge how they derived their name, nor did he accept to even refer to them by his name, the name they assumed. Ownership was the only relation Europeans associated with us in their names. When we carry their name, we affirm that ownership in mind and spirit. Our culture places importance on name. Put respect on it. Keep my name out your mouth. We fight one another to preserve the honor of our slaver's name. Any warm feelings, nostalgia about names that only serve as ties to our hurt and bondage is evidence of a curious variety of Stockholm syndrome that we need to check. It's time to stop unwittingly partaking in our own undoing. There's nothing we can do about our history, but there's plenty we can do about our culture, which are the actions we engage in to ensure our future. So what do? We, myself included, need to reconnect with ourselves, the earth, the cosmos, and each other in order to develop an identity of our own orchestration.
It's not just to say, I know it, but it must change you. It must make a better you. When you know what you have done, how you have suffered, how you have lived, what you have done for the world, it should make you live a better life.
Let's discuss creation for ourselves on the most primal level, producing children. Our heritage is of a culture that values children above all else, and rightfully so. In our interrupted, disoriented condition, we've lost the importance of bringing forth our ancestors. We have distanced ourselves from the belief that our children should be conceived with intent. There should be a vision and purpose for our creations. There should be dutiful preparation for their existence, a path forged for them to realize a communal goal. In all fairness, I suspect that the lack of our purposeful procreation may be another side effect of our great Ma'afa. For generations, we brought forth life that we could not affect. We have to acknowledge that we have lost our way and then do what it takes to align ourselves on the right path again.
And I know, heaven knows that woman was something. I talked to my moms. So that's why Daddy went after her. I don't blame the boy. The brother had very good reason to run after the sister. But that's the way I look. I look at myself as what's happening. I am the first and last thing that ever happened. You understand? That's why you'll never see me with drugs, because I am too cool to use drugs. I mean, I can't disturb. You see, I can't disturb this precious golden body. See, Mama and Daddy took too much patience to make me. I wasn't one of those flash of the moment. They took time to create. They had to take time to create a precious item like me. You got to see why. I know my history. I know where I came from.
As human beings, we're desperate for something to live for. The hype of consumerism only goes so far. It lasts for so long before we desire something new to bring fulfillment. We watch the search to fill the void play out with the ultra-rich. They have everything that can be purchased, and yet they're depressed. Fulfillment isn't realized for them until they start creating charities that they actually participate in, connecting with other beings. It puts things into perspective as to what real wealth is for these individuals. I have identified children as an oxygenating element of nation building. New life. Children are an energizing force. When asked about his family, Donald Glover said this: "Children are life's great context." I take that to mean that children form the setting for our lives. Their existence shapes the terms under which we live our lives. In our righteous Alkebu-Lan minds, Let me qualify my statement. We are less likely to be reckless with our limited resources, our time and energy, when we know that the outcome of someone's life depends on those very resources. Cooperative economics is a manner in which we can realize Kujichagulia, build enterprises together to serve our needs. We need to redirect from where we're currently serving everyone else. Our needs as a community continue to go unmet, which perpetuates our suffering as a people. Let's build so that our children have something they can build upon in advance. How many of us wake up every day and work to create for ourselves? An overwhelming number of us wake up to create for others, and not just any other. We create for our oppressors. We work to realize our oppressors' dreams. We are looped in an oppressive state that we work diligently for the oppressor to preserve. There's everything wrong with that. No one can redirect you to build dreams for them if you already have a purpose for yourself. We have to create alternative options for our children, motivate them to excel academically to realize their dreams. Landing a job needs to be considered the last option, perhaps to gain industry knowledge for their specific dream. Jobs should be a stepping stone to realize self-determination. Why? Because we need to get ourselves out of the behavior of subservience. Let's start empowering our children to dream. To speak for ourselves, we must create platforms that are exclusively designed to communicate and serve our purpose.
We have to know our history and know it well in order to regain our dignity. One of the things that we are doing, we are asking European America to teach us African history. You're crazy. You got to do that yourself. American education have never failed. It have never been better. It is the best education in America. It was designed for Europeans when it started, and it's still designed for Europeans.
We must believe we have rights and expect them to be respected and have a recourse when they're not. We'll need information, answers, and to develop a network of allies on our terms. Get what we need out of interactions from others. Historically, we have not.
We can't say we're going to be an African people, yet do everything that they tell us do. And until that time, we're not going to change anything.
Kujichagulia, self-determination, the act of directly affecting, impacting yourself, a necessary component for free minds that lead themselves. It's important to develop an awareness of how our personal life roles are affected and contribute to the well-being of our families, communities, and ultimately our culture. The principles of self-determination are supported by freedom and authority. What is your dream for our people? What strengths have you identified? How do we use this to our advantage to realize our dream of a powerful Alkebu-Lan? What weaknesses do we have that you've identified? What can be done about those weaknesses? Kujenga taifa leo. Build a nation today. That's our mantra. That's our goal. It's going to take each and every one of us to achieve this goal. Not sure how you can contribute? Offer your guidance. Tell us what you think. We'd like to know what aspects of nation building you would like to hear addressed. Kujenga taifa leo. We need to hear from you in order to build a nation today.